Giles, good morning. How are you doing today?
Great, thanks, Simon. Yourself?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, in the office today on a Wednesday, so yeah, in good spirits. Pretty cold outside, but all good. Thanks for asking. Appreciate you taking the time out your busy schedule to record with us today. So thanks for that. So today, the episode that we're going to cover with Giles is all around sales enablement. Okay, for people that haven't really sort of zoomed into the show or beamed in, we've done a couple of different episodes over the series of these shows with different subject matter experts, people like Kunal, Danielle, and Andrea. But today's topic is sales enablement for two of the fastest growth companies in the history of SaaS. And what I mean by that is ServiceNow, where Giles spent a good chunk of time, and also Snowflake, which obviously everybody knows that's in this space. So, but for people that don't know me, my name's Simon Gregory. I'm a director of Thornton Gregory. As a business, we work with software companies specifically, and we help them sort of find sort of go-to-market talent for their teams across EMEA and in the US. I felt after maybe 10 years nearly in the space, I met over that time, obviously hundreds of people, thousands of people, no doubt, some of which have such amazing experience and stories, which, I managed to touch upon within my conversations with them. But I felt what brilliant way to kind of give back to the community a little bit, to create a platform and a podcast that could delve a little bit deeper into, some of those stories and real life experiences, which is why we sort of started to build these episodes about 18 months ago, talking to people like Giles, obviously, about sales enablement, as I mentioned, but also things around RevOps, which is related, of course, customer success, go-to-market, global leadership, building into new territories, and the like. So, if you haven't seen any of these, tune in, subscribe. We're on all the normal platforms, Spotify, YouTube, etc. So yeah, we'd love you to follow us. So just like in terms of when I bumped into Giles. He's clearly got an amazing CV, international guy, spent a lot of time around the world, seen lots of stuff. But ServiceNow, as we know, is just an amazing business. I was doing a little bit of research before this, and the time that you were there, I don't know if you know this, Giles, but between 2014 and 2020, I found that they grew from 683 million ARR to 4.5 billion in that time. Which is just astonishing, really. And it took 6 years to get to 100 million ARR, which a lot of companies never make. And then it took 10 years, so 4 additional years, to get to 1 billion ARR. It's just like really, really staggering numbers. And then look, Snowflake, as I mentioned, anybody that doesn't know the IPO there, probably needs to look it up. But yeah, that was obviously a pretty cool time, I'm sure, to join the business. Obviously, riding the wave of all of that. So look, without further ado, let's dive into this. Yeah. So look, Giles, for the people, I've given you a little bit of an intro there, so sorry to steal your thunder slightly, but for people that don't know you, can you just give us a little bit about your kind of story and career today?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Simon. Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, you're right. I mean, ServiceNow was an awesome journey. I think probably how I got there and into ServiceNow is probably it was an interesting journey for me to take as well. So, look, I mean, my background, I've always been in sales or sales leadership. So all through my 20s, I did that. I decided at a relatively early age I wanted to leave the UK and explore the world, and managed to get a role in China, in all places, in Beijing. So was selling in Beijing. Actually did some recruiting in Beijing, believe it or not, with expats at the time. So a lot of returning expats from the UK, from the Americas were coming back and were wanting placements, and so spent some time doing recruitment, which was awesome, and then went back into sales. And so spent 6 years in China, did a stint in Thailand for about a year, which was, I'll say, was work, but it was more kind of playing golf and hanging out, to be fair, after a hard 6 years in China. And then got the opportunity to go to Tokyo. So did 2 years in Tokyo in Japan, which was, really interesting, amazing culture, amazing people, such a different way of doing business compared to pretty much anywhere else on the planet. Was doing a lot of leadership development there, a lot of team sort of development and high performing teamwork, selling to big companies like Apple, and running big leadership programs and team development programs all over Asia.
Cool.
And then happened to come to Singapore one day on a work trip, and kind of fell in love with Singapore and wanted to move there. And at Singapore was where I actually transitioned from leadership development and realized I wanted to go back into sales. Like I really wanted to hone my art of selling, and I also wanted to help other people to be better at selling. So I joined a company called Huthwaite, which was now Miller Hyman, which has now been bought by Korn Ferry. So, they're a big organization, part of a bigger organization. And really started to hone the skill of selling, like how to sell to big enterprise companies, how to look at doing account planning, executive management, negotiation, all of the elements that you kind of make up in sales. And that was a phenomenal time. And then decided that I wanted to go in-house. I wanted to sort of go. I didn't want to sort of do it for 18 months and then move on to the next customer. I wanted to own the strategy, work with the board, work with the executives, and implement these things properly. And so I came across a little unknown company at the time called ServiceNow. I had no idea who they were. They had 1,000 people globally. I was employee number 4, I think, in the enablement team. They wanted someone to head up, be a business partner in APAC in Singapore. And then basically put the rocket skates on, and off we went. Very quickly became the global head for rolling out sales process for them, and then 6 years later was running enablement for them. Then moved to Snowflake, then moved on and sort of and moved back to the UK because I had a few kids, and then they were getting to that age where they needed to go to from an education perspective. We wanted to come back to the UK, and been here 5 years, and those sort of a wild ride. So it's been really interesting.
Yeah, incredible. You're completely unique, but exciting and diverse. I mean, APAC is fascinating to me. I haven't really did a little bit of recruitment out there, but such a brilliant but fragmented market. Culturally and totally different to do business in each of them. That's really cool. In terms of key milestones in your career, have you got any? And if so, can you talk to those?
Yeah, I think, I kind of touched on a few of them there actually. And, you mentioned about Asia. I think that being a kind of global citizen, if you like, I've spent a lot I was based in Asia, working for US companies, from Europe. So kind of, understanding all those different cultures, understanding and appreciating the different life experiences that I've had over my career has been phenomenal. Like you said, it's kind of fragmented and all these different cultures and people, and really gaining appreciation for the differences across those landscapes, how people operate. That's been something which I think has held me in really good stead to be able to understand and run a global business, right? So and there's tendencies, if you've never been to APAC and you're in the US, to think that everything runs as it does in the US or it does in Europe. And so really being able to know that there are differences in how people think and how they're talking in Japan versus Germany versus UK versus the US, I think has been something that's really helped me sort of progress my career. I did mention kind of that honing the skill, the selling skill. Big thank you to people like Greg Moore, who was my boss at the time, and James Fennessy, who were really instrumental in helping me to do that and drive my career and actually become a top selling billing consultant for them at the time. And I think what that did for me ultimately was meant that when I then it opened the door for me to go and do enablement internally, which I think has been my kind of true calling, if you like. It's been where I've really kind of cut my teeth, and so that was amazing. There's another one that's coming. It's probably a bit forward thinking, but having done this a few times now, what I'm starting to see, both from a consulting perspective and actually being in-house, is I think all customers think they're different. All departments think they have all these different challenges. The reality is, I think often they don't. They're all quite similar. I think the way to be successful in that is not to treat everything the same, but understand their similar challenges, and then figuring out which piece of the puzzle is most important to executive leadership there and then, and then working with them closely to fix that. So I think what it's enabled me to do is I kind of see now I've started to build an enablement blueprint, if you like a playbook of how to look at a company depending on what stage of growth it's at. Is it early stage startup mentality? Is it more mature? And start to say, okay, what are the levers that we need to do? What play are we going to do here to, whether that be improve value selling, move from product sales to a platform, think about how we move to more use cases and solutions. The plays are endless, but it's just like figuring out what those ones are really important and then how to do that. And ultimately, what I'd like to do is take that somewhere down the line in my career and start to use that with other companies and consult and be able to help avoid some of the mistakes that I made in the early days.
So you're saying there's common themes and challenges for companies at certain stages. You're identifying that and working on those common themes and prioritizing them with the leadership team to solve them, and you can lift and shift that into each environment ideally. That's really interesting. Really interesting. Okay. Hugely complex. I mean, you simplify it so nicely, but hugely complex at scale, no doubt. Yeah.
It is. I think, and again, I think that it is complex, but you can make it simple. I think the world's evolved as well, like in terms of the way that we do enablement, introduction of technologies and AIs. I think we're going to impact that as we go forward. There's definitely going to be changes, but I still believe that there is there's some fundamental things with it that enablement function is responsible for, and getting things like executive alignment and figuring out what the play is that's going to be most effective are a key piece to being successful in this business.
Okay, cool. I gave a few of the metrics at the top of the conversation about ServiceNow's growth and Snowflake, both of which are hugely fascinating environments at scale, right? Can you share a little bit more about those experiences and sort of the lessons that you learned? Yeah,
sure. I mean, ServiceNow, amazing. As I said, it went from, I joined, there was 1,000 people. Nearly 7 years later, I left. I think it was just under 15,000 people. The enablement team grew to 120 people. It was a beast. It was a wild ride. It was before COVID. Things were different. We had lots of money. We were spending lots of money, but we were doing great things. I mean, it was very unique. I remember the head of the VP of APAC at the time, Jimmy Fitzgerald, in his office one day, just sort of talking away and him saying to me, Giles, I've worked for a lot of startups and done this a few times, and this one is a special one. This, you don't get these all the time. And I remember going, yeah, no, they must all be like this, and then realizing that's not the case. Having consulted with a lot of startups that maybe don't always get there. So yeah, it was phenomenal. And if you look at the success since I left, it continues to fly. It's massive. Stock prices, I think, triple what it was when I left. They're growing. They're everywhere. So phenomenal business. I think some of the things that were phenomenal there were we kind of were a traditional enablement team when I joined. We were fortunate enough to actually start to look at sales strategy and enablement, and we combined them. And so under the leadership of a gentleman called Mike Sheehy, who I think is actually still there, he's a great guy, we really started to think about how do we bring the alignment with the business, so the alignment with the head of sales, the alignment with the things and the priorities that the business was trying to drive to, and then bringing in enablement to that. We also, part of that was set up a very robust operating cadence, which was what should the managers be doing on a daily basis, weekly basis? How should they be talking to their reps? We built playbooks to support that, and I would say that for people in enablement today, or building an enablement function, actually looking at the frontline sales manager and doing that early on is the most important thing you can do from a sales enablement perspective. I obviously today I look at enablement holistically because I cover everything from sales, BDR, partners and customer enablement. So it's a broader scale, but if you're looking at sales enablement, that really is one of the shifts. Like making sure that your sales managers are equipped, they're the force multiplier, they're the people that are going to make the difference of are you achieving your revenue numbers or not. And so putting that rigor around how they do it and giving them guidance and help is super important.
No, awesome. You picked some good companies there to work for, clearly, right? You kind of make it sound like you were maybe a little bit unawares when you joined ServiceNow, but great choice. But with a CV like you have now, I'm sure when you're looking, you're not short of opportunities. Why among many options did you decide to choose those two companies?
So I kind of boiled it down to four things. I've thought about this over the years, and picking different organisations. I think that the first thing you have to look at is the company, right? Like, do you align with that company? Do you resonate with the product? Does it look like the right kind of product for you, or a market fit? Like, is it something that you can get behind, and is it something that there is a market fit for? Customers are going to want. And then, what do you think the total addressable market is? So I think, that has to be the first thing that you look at. I think the second thing I then start to look at is, like, what's the leadership team look like? Who is leading the business? What will the leadership team below that be like? What will my peers be like? And then most importantly, I think it's who's going to be my boss. Like, no matter, enablement, enablement can sit in many different places, from the CRO to RevOps to even HR in certain cases, and I think it doesn't. There's places where it fits better and places where it doesn't. Sort of averagely, but ultimately it's down to who is my leader. Can I get on with them? Are we aligned in terms of how we're going to drive enablement? Is it seen as a strategic a partnership? There are many times where enablement is seen as the training function. That's disappearing, but in organizations where it's just a tick the box exercise, they're not the ones I'd be particularly interested in talking to, because I think enablement in today's world is so important in the business. And so I look at, is this someone that I'm going to be able to work well with, and that is going to be able to reinforce and help drive the agenda that he's got and that he's setting, and I can support it. Third, I look at kind of my own career aspirations. Where do I want to go? I'm always thinking, where do I want to be in 3 to 5 years from now as well. And so I think that's important, because every career step I've made was a stepping stone, I think, to something else. And whether you stay somewhere a year or 10 years, it's always important, I think, to have aspirations beyond that. And then I think the last thing you have to really be mindful of, and I've made the mistake in this scenario before, is looking at what your current circumstances are and what your motivations are, and figuring out, is that the right fit for me right now? Like, you can have great companies or big salaries put in front of you, but if it doesn't match with your values or your lifestyle or your family situations or your health situations, whatever it is, maybe you've got health issues and you're going to be asked to travel 80% of the time. Like, don't chase the gold, if per se. Like, think about your own situation, what's right for you, and make sure that you sort of work towards that, because I think that has a massive impact on whether you can be successful and ultimately happy. And I kind of link, if I look at where I do really well, I look at, if I'm happy in what I'm doing, I'm typically successful. Doesn't mean it's not always challenging, but those two, I think, end up going hand in hand.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think going back to one of the first points you made about being that strategic business partner, I think maybe not so much at companies of the size that you've worked at. You tell me if I'm wrong here, but certainly in the startup space that I've spent a lot of time in, I find that companies or revenue leaders, some really, really, really understand the value of sales enablement, and they get it, and they build the professional function, they give the resources and the budget required. And some companies feel like they need it, but have no idea how to implement it, and really, really can get it quite badly wrong. So, I know Gartner have done a really good job, I think, in recent years of highlighting the value that sales enablement can bring, like some of the data around that, and companies that embrace this way of working and alignment have X output as opposed to not. But I mean, do you agree? I know you said you do some consulting maybe on the side. Do you agree with that comment? Like that bigger companies have it a bit more worked out or not? Or it's more, or just more of a mess, bigger mess?
I think you go into organizations, especially bigger ones, thinking that they've got it figured out, and you realize that they don't always have it all figured out. There's always
Okay, fine.
something that they haven't got right. And often,
Yeah,
actually, some of the smaller organizations, startups specifically, have hired, they're run by exceptionally smart people if they're successful. They
yeah,
hire exceptionally smart people. And they're all geared around delivering results and they're able to drive it. And if you get a good enablement person within that, like a good operator, then enablement is extremely successful and important.
yeah,
The challenge becomes then as you want to scale that, right? Because there's one, as a business scales, the needs of enablement evolve. You go from typically, most enable people in startup are kind of probably doing the onboarding, a bit of manager development, a bit of product development, and probably a bit of technical stuff for the SEs because they haven't got a dedicated person to do that yet. And then probably partner enablement. So you're doing a sort of a jack of all trades across those, which means you're doing all of them at a level, but probably not going deep on them because you just don't have the time and the resources.
yeah,
It's pretty scrappy, right? And that's that startup mentality. As you scale that, you need to be able to have much more deeper kind of knowledge in each of those areas, plus others around analytics, AI, program management, reporting, all of the other pieces that you need to think about, change management. And so I think it's hard to make that transition from kind of startup mentality to bigger and then scale it and do it in a way that supports the business. But ultimately, I think, again, the companies that invest in enablement will have a higher return in terms of in their people retention, etc. It's now a lot of companies when they look to pre-IPO or looking at anything that they're going to do market adjustment like that or any kind of event, look to have a senior, if not VP of enablement in place.
Yeah, I agree with that. Agree wholeheartedly with that. I think the reason why I've done this would be like the fourth episode on this topic is because it's such a changing and dynamic area of the market that we've just touched upon there, right? How have you seen the craft of enablement evolve over the time that you've been in it?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question. It's a big one as well because it has changed so much. I mean, if you take like I think I mentioned a minute ago, if you sort of think 10 years ago, it was a training function that was out of probably HR, maybe ops, maybe sales, but it was very much seen as the people that built the training and delivered the training, whether that be virtual or some on-demand e-learning. You fast forward that and it's significantly different. Today, we typically report to the CRO or COO or somewhere very tied closely to revenue ops, and I think that's the other shift that's made is it's not necessarily called sales enablement anymore. The role has shifted. But if I look at when I started at ServiceNow and I started at Snowflake, the role was sales enablement. It was specifically geared towards supporting sales. Very quickly in both organizations, they said, can you take on the SEs? Can you take on all the CAM and the channel and the alliances? Can you take on professional services? Can you take on customer success? And so it broadened across the entire GTM function, which meant that you had a much broader scope, but you also could find synergies between those groups as well, which was super important. And so today, and if I look at where I am with Mimecast, as I mentioned, I own enablement across all functions. So I own the BDR enablement from marketing, all of GTM, partner, internal, external, and customer. And I think that's super important because the customer journey has changed. The buying process that they follow is different. And the lines between the handoff points of all of those are blurred. And so the enablement that an internal person needs and the enablement that a partner needs and the enablement that a customer needs are very similar. So there's lots of synergies that you can get from actually and efficiencies you can get from doing enablement across all those groups. But there's also some real opportunities to get some real upside in terms of the value that you get to the customer in the way that they get exposed to you, the way that you're dealing with partners, and then the amount of time in terms of reduction of time and productivity you can get from your internal folks by giving them the enablement they need when they need it. And then I think from a technology perspective, which is a big piece I think of enablement today. If you go back 10 years ago, the money was on training. You paid for sales methodology. You paid a couple of $1 million or whatever the figure was. It was the highest ticket item in the budget, and it was your 2-day in-person training, and everyone went through it, and it was expensive. You fast forward that 5 years ago, and there was a shift to technology. Now all of a sudden technology budgets are coming into enablement, bigger ones. Companies like MindTickle were disrupting the LMS space. Companies like Seismic were disrupting the content management space. Clary from Revenue Ops. And it was needed to happen because we needed to be able to get our hands on platforms that were aligned to how the go-to-market organization wanted to function versus like the typical old LMS and then everything done manually. You go back, 3 years ago, Gong with conversation intelligence, and all the conversation intelligence exploded. And I think that's probably one of the most important milestones in enablement, and being able to align enablement to metrics and measures. And I'll go into more detail around that as we sort of carry on. But that was a pivotal moment because then we were able to really understand how are people applying the skills on the job in the set, and then being able to understand what that was, and then we can coach to it and we can manage it. We can also see, is the enablement that we're delivering being effective? We're asking people to do X. Are they actually doing it in the field, and is it working? So game changer from a ROI perspective, which enablement should always be striving to get and doesn't always get there if the system isn't set up properly. And then I think in the last 12 months, as everybody knows, right? I mean, AI is not a surprise. It's here, and it's here to stay. And the wave is already gone. You're not on the cusp of it. You're on the back end of it, but it's going to continue to travel in, and that's changing the game completely. Like, we're in a different paradigm than we will ever be in, and so it's kind of a big unknown now. People are asking me like, "What's your tech stack going to look like? How are you going to do these things?" And I'm like, the stuff in part of my blueprint. Well, that bit of it needs to evolve and needs to change because we're in a different world today.
So do you feel like people are testing all this stuff out, but nobody really knows what that tech stack, is that what you're saying? It's still just too early to, like, there's not enough data or experience applied to it?
Yeah, I think there's just so much, if you think about the internet bubble, right, and everything all suddenly burst out there, and then there was a bubble. I think there will be an AI bubble at some point, that will burst.
Yeah.
Today there are so many options out there. You've got the existing players that have been around a long time that are bolting on AI to their systems, which is making them more effective. You've got the new AI tools that are coming out, which are more nimble, sort of ankle biters, if you want to call it that, but they're exploding as well. But then you've also got the fact that there are many AI packages, software, etc., that actually empower the users to build their own programs, their own agents. And I think that's probably the future of AI agents and the SaaS business. And then obviously there's going to be a massive impact on enablement as well, and how we do enablement, because we are going to be able to control our kind of own destiny and how we engage our end users and what they get delivered, and it's going to be a very different world.
Yeah, cool. Exciting nonetheless, though. Yeah. You're talking about it with enthusiasm, or do you see it as, challenging or disruptive in any way?
Massively disruptive. So,
okay,
in a good way. I think that if we just take, and it's probably off track from an enablement perspective, but I think if you look at the SaaS market going forward, I don't know at what point this will happen, but it will be entirely disrupted. I think you will not buy SaaS and applications as the way you do today in the future.
Okay.
You won't go and buy a CMS or one of these these platforms to support the enablement. What will happen is companies will move to agents as a service. And so what we'll do is, instead of having a subscription-based cost for some of this technology in the enablement space, I think you're going to move to an outcome base. So companies are going to be coming to say, what outcome are you trying to achieve? And then the role of the enablement function will be to train agents to be able to do that action. So we're kind of looking at this at the moment in my current organization around our sales methodology. So implementing a value-based system. It's not a sales methodology anymore, because methodologies are kind of dying. You used to have to go and do all your research. You have to think about the questions you were going to ask in a sales cycle. Today, with an agent, click a button, you can get all that information about any CISO, about any company, and it will put together a profile for you to then go and figure out, okay, these are the things that this person might care about. These are the questions I should ask. These are the things that are solutions and how they fit. This is the pain they might be feeling. And if you understand those things, then the skill set that you need is to be able to go out and actually have a conversation and uncover and figure out whether those things are correct or not. Now, you have a conversation, you come back, and with AI, it's going to calculate what you've said, what the outcomes were, what you're putting into it, and it's going to recommend things for you to do from there. It's going to suggest, go and ask these questions, go and have this conversation with these people. It might tell you actually that you actually, based on other data that we've seen from other sellers, you weren't effective in a certain area. Maybe you didn't handle objections well. So go and take this training. Take that a step forward. It's also going to tell the manager, these are the areas that you need to focus on. This deal you should talk to this rep about because they weren't effective, or this deal's going to be at risk. It might not be forecasted. And so the level of insight and data that we're going to be able to provide the field through these agents, as I said, is a game changer. But what that does is impact, I think, is it impacts how SaaS businesses work, implements how they implement them, and it changes the behavior to tracking how an agent is performing versus the customer CSAT or customer success scores. It's going to be a very different world, is my prediction.
Yeah, really, really cool. I guess that you touched upon, like a hypothetical state there, which is super fascinating. But in general, how do you see, I mean, you have a great sort of purview on this, I think, from probably your peers, as well as what you're seeing just in general from your companies you work for and stuff. How do you see 2025 play out as a market?
So I think, as I mentioned, you're going to see AI and AI agents sort of take over the market and how they operate. I mean, that changes the way that enablement functions service their key stakeholders, the field. So I think that's a huge one. Like it can't be taken lightly. It changes the way that we buy technology. It takes the way we implement technology. It changes the way that we, as I mentioned, coach and drive results through the field. It also dramatically changes the way that we build content and how we deliver it. So, I've recently purchased some software, an AI program that called Synthesia, for those of you that know it. Yeah. And that enabled us to cut our delivery time or creation time on kind of baseline 101 video content from 6 weeks to 1 week. So we got 6x return on that, and that is one example of many where we've implemented some AI pieces in there to be able to do more with less. And I think that's going to be the future as well. Is like, we don't know where the economies are going, but we're probably, a while off before where there's an abundance of money to go and hire resources and spend on frivolously like we've probably had in the past. So it's what can you do with the resources you've got and how can you expand it? And again, I don't want to keep harping on about AI, but AI is the enabler that enables you to get a lot more output without keep adding heads. I think, one of the things that we did early on, about 14 months ago, was built an AI center of excellence. So an enablement AI Centre of Excellence. We built out a certification so that people understood how to use Gen AI, how to use prompt engineering, and then we made sure that everyone on the team had gone through that. We did a full stack, analysis of all of our AI tools within our tools and how to optimize those. And then we use things, as I mentioned, like Synthesia to make sure that we could increase our output across customers, internal MSPs, partners, so that we could create highly tailored content, and we could do it at scale. We could do it in multiple languages, all at the click of a button.
It's cool. That's really cool, isn't it? Blimey. I heard of Synthesia. I heard they're absolutely blowing up. I think UK headquartered company, which is also, I always love to see that. Multiple languages, like almost like, am I right to say almost like, creates like an avatar of yourself that you can spin up content, as you say, in like a click of a button?
Yeah. So if you think about, old content creation, you kind of had an idea about, someone said you wanted to record some content, you had to sit down with the stakeholder, you wrote them a script, or they wrote a script, then you built out a storyboard, then you built it, then you went back and forward creating the content and editing it, and you did it in some of the old, kind of traditional programs to build out the e-learning. And a 30-minute e-learning could take up to 6 weeks with the back and forth and the sign-off, etc. Today, we use tools like ChatGPT, Gemini. We put in the data around what we think the script should be based on what we know from the scoping. We build the script out, then we move it to another platform, typically something like Gemini, and we build out the storyboard, all in AI. This takes less than a day. We then share that script with the subject matter expert and make sure that we're on track. And so now they've actually got something that they can react to. We get their feedback, we run that back through the system. We get feedback from the field to make sure that it's accurate and it's relevant and valuable to them. Then we put it in something like Synthesia, and within half an hour, we've got our first version of an AI-generated e-learning or on-demand video, which, it's still an AI avatar. You can tell if you really look, but it's improving all the time. And people don't want to sit through 8 hours of training today. They want the YouTube style, they want Netflix style, they want these short 2, 3, 4 minute videos. And if they're relevant and valuable, they'll watch an hour of them, but they don't want to sit through an hour of training. And so I think, that was a shift that we've made in 2025. And if people haven't made that shift, they should certainly be looking to do that quickly, because it is going to, obviously it has a big productivity gain across what an enablement function can drive as well.
Okay, cool. Sales enablement and RevOps as functions, how have they kind of evolved?
Yeah, so I think, we touched on it earlier on in terms of sales enablement was I think they're fairly siloed. They were seen as the training people, and and sales ops was seen as the operations function that was typically around sales. I think this whole notion of revenue operations has changed, and it aligns with the way I think about enablement. So I partner incredibly closely with our RevOps teams in all the organizations I've worked with. There are some key people stakeholders that you have to partner well with, and you want to partner well with, so that you can support your end user, which is the field ultimately, and that's RevOps, marketing, HR, right? They're sort of, and product marketing, and they're your kind of core functions that you really want to make sure that you've got a strong relationship, because often enablement is kind of that conduit in the middle of all those to help corral things and bring things together to get them into the field in the right way. So, I think with the first wave of improving that connection and driving a strong connection between RevOps and enablement was the access to more data, the access to a data lake, something like Snowflake, which was phenomenal. To land in Snowflake and know that I was going to be able to go, okay, I've got data in Salesforce, I've got data in our CMS, I've got data in our LMS, I've got data all over the place. And one of the biggest challenges I've had, throughout my career was, how do you bring all that data together to create meaningful insights that you can then, one, demonstrate the value of enablement, but two, go back to the business and give them insights as to things that they should be focusing on. enablement that their team should be doing, areas where there are gaps in pipeline or what have you that you can identify and help them to fill. And so Snowflake was amazing because you could put all of that information, all those customers into the data lake, and then with the right support, you could get that insight. And I think what's important for enablement leaders out there and revenue operations leaders is don't underestimate the value of putting business analyst support or some business intelligence support to an enablement function. It's not where it normally sits, but I've always either partnered closely with BI or RevOps, wherever it sits, to get resources, whether that means me giving up a headcount and it sits on their team, which is my preference because you want them all together, or if it's meant I've had to go a standalone and hire someone or a contractor. But you can do amazing things if you get the right data and insights. It's going to be interesting to see with the evolution of AI how that continues and whether we can just do it ourselves, which I believe is where it'll end up. But definitely in the past, that's how I've seen it evolve.
Yeah. Okay. Sales enablement, there's no doubt sales enablement has been affected by many things, but COVID clearly was just such a crazy experience for everybody. But, that kind of shift in terms of where everybody was working must have been pretty mad for you guys in particular. Firstly, what was your personal experience of COVID, and how has that affected, in your opinion, your craft?
Yeah, so I mean, COVID sucked, right? I mean, that was the basis of it, and I think it changed the world astronomically for a relatively long period of time. Even after COVID, I'd say that we're probably out of it now, but it was probably only a year ago where did I actually feel that things returned back to kind of normal. And so I joined Snowflake in COVID, so that was it was an interesting time. So for I think it was probably 6 to 9 months I wasn't able to get to HQ, wasn't to meet many of my stakeholders, but it was the world we lived in. I think the big thing was we had things like sales kickoffs that we had to do. We had to transfer everything to on demand. It was a lot of ILT at the time, so everyone will have known this, has gone through it. But it was, how do you engage people in a way over video, when a lot of the stuff that you're doing, if you look at any of the report, I was reading the Gartner report the other day, while not all reps like it, one of the best way, which has the highest learning outcomes to enable anyone, is through role play. And then on the job coaching also. So we can do that through conversation intelligence. There's actually tools now that can actually do on the job coaching. But at the time we didn't have that, and so it was hard. So we went on to demand. We had to really think about how we highlighted the different learning styles so that we could, really categorize if it was more of information or more process stuff, that it would be very low touch. It would be documentation, short videos, and then if we were going to do things like a SCO, or we needed to do a enablement that had multiple pieces and it had to be live on Zoom, then we would spread that out over a period of time. We'd give people work assignments, and we'd say, right, you have 2 hours every week or every other week versus trying to do it all in 8 hours in one day, because people just switched off. So it really did kill productivity thing. And I think the biggest issue, which was stemmed beyond enablement and across businesses, and I think that's why you're seeing such an influx from a lot of companies around getting people back into the office, was it killed those water cooler conversations where you and the relationship building side of it, and ultimately enhanced a lot of silo mentality. And so we spent a lot of time, even now, kind of still breaking down those silos and improving collaboration, because people just got really used to being in front of their computer, talking to their peers, 30-minute meeting with an agenda, and then on to the next. And you miss those connection points, which I think is super important.
Yeah, 100%. Technology, you touched about AI, but technology in general, are there any kind of must-haves for any early stage SaaS company? And how does that tech stack maybe evolve over the sort of life cycle of a business, whether that be headcount or ARR?
Yeah, so I go back to AI again. I think it's so disruptive. It is changing the way that people do business and the way that we engage with folks. I think you got to, if you're in the SaaS business and you're a startup, you're probably really deep and exposed to some of the cutting edge AI that's out there. But I would say that a key one for me, as I mentioned, which I think is a game changer across the board, is conversation intelligence. You've got to be able to record calls with your customers for a number of reasons. Obviously, one is that you're hearing what the salespeople or your salespeople are talking about, or the SEs are talking about, the technical challenges, customer success, if you've got that and you're that far ahead as a business. But also the use cases are immense for your support teams, for your product teams, for them to actually really understand like what customers are saying about your product. They can't be on every call, but if you've got that data, you can start to pull it together and find commonalities, themes, areas where they're not happy with the product, or there are things that they think are missing, or what they want to have happen. So I think that's a no-brainer. And all the startups I talk to have pretty much got conversation intelligence or some in the background. So that's cool. That's cool. And then I think on AI investments, start small but think about use cases. And AI agents is the way forward. The other thing, which is difficult when you're a small SaaS company, but is to start to map out the buyer journey. It's not necessarily a technology thing, but start to think about how your buyers are buying and how they're going through that process versus what is the sales process that you want to follow. Excuse me. I think it's really important that people understand that are positioning things and going through a process that a customer, certainly in the startup world, wants to be part of.
So with that, it's trying to reduce the friction points, trying to create as easy a process from a buying perspective. Maybe do you feel like few think about it from that perspective, and they're trying to force their sort of sales process on said buyer or prospect?
Yeah, I just think that it's changed a lot. The dynamics are different in terms of what a customer can be exposed to, and being too rigid in that scenario will not fare well with the customer, and you ultimately just do lots of demos and never really really get to the pain that they're facing. It's very, when you've got a product and you're in startup mode, you're very focused on trying to get that product to fit with them. It's very difficult to then sometimes break the mold and go, actually, no, what is it? I might not be able to solve this problem, but what problems does this customer have, and how do they align with what we're doing, and then the broader ecosystem. And as a company evolves from typically it's a product or a feature, to a couple of products, to multi-product, to platform, you've got to be able to evolve your sales process and your thinking, and it's important to do that early, so that when you're talking to buyers, you're understanding the broader ecosystem that they are thinking in and that they operate in, and then you can start to think about where your product fits.
Okay. So, it's like a mentor and advisor in the space. For anybody that's coming into or has aspirations to come into sales enablement as a career choice, how would you point them to any industry groups, books, or kind of communities to help them along their way and accelerate their learning?
Yes, I think there's the Sales Enablement Society, which is very well known on LinkedIn. I think a lot of people kind of access that if you're already enablement. So they're growing and got a big following. Couple of books that I read early on that really helped me. One was a book called Sales Enablement by Byron Matthews. That was a great book. It probably needs a bit of an update around AI today, as I mentioned, but foundationally, how to think about enablement, really, really good book that kind of acted as a bit of a Bible to me. And then there was another book called Data Driven Enablement, which was written by Jenny Dearborn, who was I think the L&D leader actually at SAP at the time, and she co-wrote that with someone called Sanchita Sir, who's actually a friend of mine now, and she's the CEO for a company called Mplay, and that was actually something that we implemented, back in ServiceNow days 10 years ago. So we won a few awards in 2019 for implementing AI solutions around sales productivity before AI was really a thing. And so, she's phenomenal. And that book really kind of shows you some of the underpinnings, if you like, of where how AI kind of got to where it is, and I think where it's going. So those two books really sit. And then I'm going to plug it again, but today, get using Gen AI tools. Like, get good at prompt engineering, start to build some content, start to build some frameworks around enablement, start to query those, and then test them with people in the field, with other enablement professionals. I'm happy to if anyone wants to go back and forth with me and riff with me through LinkedIn and talk about some of this stuff, I'm happy to do it. But that would be my biggest takeaway: is get comfortable with using AI, because it is going to change the enablement game.
Yeah, there's been some strong themes in the conversation, which has been great. I mean, AI clearly, right? I mean, for all the right reasons, I must admit, I'm seeing it everywhere, from a recruitment perspective. I mean, maybe it's the state of the market, given that, a lot of investment is obviously in that area and there's a lot of hype. So, no, that's really cool. Look, you touched upon it there. So anybody that's kind of got this far, right, is obviously, got some great value from what we've discussed. And if they wanted to follow up the conversation with you about any of the topics we've discussed today, what's the best way to do that? Is it LinkedIn or email or?
Yeah, LinkedIn's fine. Yeah, if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to have the conversations.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, cool. All right, I think we covered some really great ground there. I think there's a little bit of fun that we always end up these episodes with, and just a couple of little quick fire questions just to get to know you a little bit better, right?
Go for it.
Over and above the sales enablement magic. But so look, first answer that comes into your head, not too much thinking, please. Yeah, brace yourself. Okay, favorite piece of tech or app you are using now?
Our new robot vacuum cleaner. It is a game changer for the house and the lack of arguments, because it does all the vacuuming.
Okay, cool. Night at the disco or night at the restaurant?
Restaurant, 100%. I'm a big steakhouse fan.
Oh, they've got my next question. Favorite food?
While I like steak, I would say my favorite food is a proper American greasy burger, if you can find it.
Oh, God, I'm hungry. Favorite movie?
I haven't probably got anything by Guy Ritchie.
Yeah, good choice. If you were to describe yourself in 2 words, what would it be and why?
Inquisitive and humble. I love learning and solving problems, especially complex problems within businesses. I get a lot from it. And humble. I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I surround myself as much as I can with smart people, and then let them do the thinking, and then help drive things forward. Great.
Can you tell me a little bit about your proudest moment in your career to date?
So I've had lots, actually, which is a nice position to be in. I would say that my proudest was my first President's Club. So the first time I ever made President's Club in my 20s, that was a really clear defining moment. Like 100%.
I've got to ask, where did you go?
We went to Hawaii.
Oh, lovely. Okay. Maybe that blends into the next question. What's your favourite place you've ever visited on holiday or visited just in general? You've been to a lot of places, I believe, as well.
Awesome. I would say Koh Samui in Thailand. It's an amazing place for any of you that have been there. It's a small island, so it's still got that small island feel. It's a very special place, I think, in my heart, because when we lived in Singapore and a lot of Asia, we spent a lot of time there on holiday with my young kids when my kids were young. And so I've got tons of good memories of playing on the beach, playing in the pool, all of those types of great things that you can do in a tropical country. So yeah, definitely Koh Samui.
Sounds like a great time of your life, that. I get some interesting answers to this last question. So if you have one, what's your guilty pleasure?
Probably food related again, which is not good. It makes me sound like all I do is eat. But I would say not all the time, but the odd late night kebab at the weekend. If we're sort of staying in and watching a movie, and I get packaged because we're up late. So that's definitely probably the one thing I shouldn't do. I regret it in the morning, put it that way.
Yeah. New year, new me. No, sounds good. Look, Giles, thanks so much for taking the time. Look, we're 55 in. I thought we covered some great ground there on an important and dynamic topic that's affecting all the companies that I have in view, and I know that in SaaS in general. So, great to kind of riff a little bit on that, and hopefully anybody's listening, subscribe, check Giles out. Get in touch if you want to learn a little bit more about anything within the topic. So thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, Simon. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Cool.